It is Wednesday, the 1st of May, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. Hello and welcome back to Pigeon's Song of the Day. It's day 3 here in the first week, and we're continuing to listen to opening tracks to fit with this being the opening of sorts of my podcast, the grand opening. So this is a show where I talk about a different song every day. Today, I will be talking about a song by a band called The Avalanches. They're an Australian band. I think the original group was like 6 Australian DJs who were making mixes together. Nowadays, it's kind of 2 main members, I think, but basically just a bunch of guys got together and made an album that used a lot of samples to make some new dancey music. Then they didn't release another album until 16 years later, and then a third album after that 4 years later. They're apparently working on album 4 right now, which is exciting. It'll be interesting if that comes out, because it's been 4 years since their last album, so I look forward to that whenever that manifests. But today, we're talking about the very first track on their first album, Since I Left You. The album is called Since I Left You, and the song is called Since I Left You. Now, all of their albums really, but their first one in particular is designed where every song flows into each other. It's kind of one cohesive piece rather than individual songs. The tracks are like kind of the different movements, but they all flow into each other. So while I am mostly going to be talking about the first song, I'm also going to talk a bit about the second song on the album, because they're kind of a pair. A lot of the songs are like main song, and then the next track is like a shorter kind of reprise and variation on that, and then it goes into a new thing, and then a shorter reprise, and so on. So I'll be talking mostly about the song Since I Left You, but I'll also be talking a bit about Stay Another Season, which is the second song. So when you go to the links in the description here, I'm going to just link to the album, and you can decide if you want to listen to the first song or the 2 songs. It's really up to you. I would recommend the 2 songs. I'd recommend the whole album because it's one of my favorite albums of all time. But for the purposes of this show, it's up to you if you want to listen to one or both. So with that in mind, please follow the links in the description, listen to the song, and we'll come back here in a moment to talk about it. I love those 2 opening songs because they set up the rest of the album, obviously, but it really immediately sets the tone, because the whole album to me has this vibe of like summer partying, beach vibes. It helps with the recurring wave sounds and all that, and summer crane and things like that. It just really sounds like a summer album. It's a great summer album. I've listened to it on many a summer, and I think the first song and its reprise really show that right away. It just feels so summer. So I mentioned at the start that this album is constructed out of samples. So the Avalanches being DJs, they didn't invent the genre, but they're kind of held up as like the big example of it. There's a genre called plunderphonics, where you make songs out of existing sounds, kind of like blackout poetry for writing. And this album uses, I think it's approximately 3,500 samples across the whole thing, which is wild. So this song, the main bits you hear are Every Day by the Main Attraction for the vocals, the whole Since I Left You, that song, and do 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 da da do 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 is sampled from a doo-wop song called The Sky's the Limit by the Duprees. Those are kind of the main things you hear throughout. There's a few songs sampled in here, of course. Also, there's a few dialogue samples from a movie called Club Med. A lot of these things are so obscure that they do not have Wikipedia pages, so that tells you a lot. You've really got to dig deeply for some of these samples, you know. That bit at the start with watch the steps, get a drink, and have a good time now, welcome to paradise. That's from Club Med. And then in Stay Another Season, it starts with the thank you for coming out this evening, thank you for coming down here at Club Med, we have a good time with you, we want you to party with it, come on down to the disco, right? That's also from Club Med. Also in terms of samples, Stay Another Season famously samples the bass line from Holiday by Madonna. Apparently when they were putting the album together, one of them put on Holiday and they all kind of laughed like, oh, what a funny thing to sample here. And then they kept working on it. They're like, oh fuck, that's integral to the song now. So they had to figure out how to include it, because I think they were like one of the first major acts to sample Madonna, and it was like a big deal. But yeah, it's a whole thing. So I'm probably not going to have as much to say about this song as others, mainly because there's not very many lyrics. It's more about the vibes rather than the story told, I guess. There is a music video with a story told in it. That'll be linked in the description too, don't worry. It's 2 miners in a black and white world, and they like dig through into a world of color where there's a dance studio, and one of the miners starts dancing with the dancers there. It's strange, it's silly, but it's good, and really follows with those kind of good vibes that the music gives. I think one of the most interesting things about the song for me, though, because any sample-based music is interesting because you wonder how they found the samples and the way they manipulate get them to use them in specific ways. It's like you really have to have a very particular way of thinking to figure out how to get from sample to finished product, you know? Like I watch anything by Andrew Wong and he's like, I'm going to take this little fraction of a second and I'm going to turn that into an entire drum kit. Like, you know, it's wild the way some people's mind works with this stuff. But what's really interesting to me about this is that recurring line throughout the song, "Since I left you, I found the world so new," is not actually that. The song and the album are called "Since I Left You." So when you hear someone say those words, you're like, that's what they're singing, obviously. But the song that they're sampling, the lyric is, "Since I met you, I found the world so new." And they didn't change, they changed the speed, like in the pitch, but they didn't edit the vocal track to make them say a different word. It's the same vocal track. So they're actually saying, "Since I met you, I found the world so new." But because the title of the song, the title of the album is "Since I Left You," that's all your mind wants to hear. It's a really interesting use of a sample, like tricking your brain like that to get this specific idea from it is really interesting, and a really interesting way to use a sample, change its context, change its meaning, because the original is like, "Since I met you, I found the world so new," is so, you know, oh, everything is beautiful and colorful, like in the music video. Now that we're together, it's a big love thing, you know? Like, I mean, the second verse is, "Oh, nothing but sunny days. Oh, cometh my way. You and me against this whole wide world, and there's nothing that could stop us now." It's pretty obvious what that's about. Whereas, "Since I Left You," even though it has this summery vibe, it's "Since I left you." It feels like a breakup song, you know? "Since I left you, I found the world so new." Everything's better now that you're gone, you know? Now, as I like to do with songs I talk about on here, I like to talk about where I discovered them. And much like Rainbow Connection, I discovered this in a funny way. It's very me. There was a Flash cartoon, would you believe? There was a Flash cartoon series called GeoWeasel, created by Nico Anesti, and it followed like this group of friends that were like trying to be villains. At least Wheeze was. He was trying to be a supervillain. The rest of them were just kind of idiots. And it was just a very silly, absurdist, like what you expect from Flash cartoons in the early 2000s. Just very silly, random humor, you know. A lot of stuff I still quote, though. Mostly, "Jim, go on without me." "Okay." I hate him. But on Nico and Nesti's DeviantArt page, they started making a music video for the song "Frontier Psychiatrist," which is from this album. And I think it, like, I can't remember now. I tried to look it up before recording this, but Flash is dead and they didn't re-upload it anywhere, so I can't, like, find the actual video. I believe they had Wheeze from GeoWeasel as a character in it. But yeah, it was like the start of a music video for Frontier Psychiatrist from this album. And I think it was the first, like, section of the song. I'm pretty sure it ended at "Avalanche is below," and then it just cut out. And that led me to looking up the album. For whatever reason, I remember distinctly that the completely legal sanctioned download that I found of it only included the tracks up to Frontier Psychiatrist, and I thought that was how the album ended, which made sense to me as an ending. And then it wasn't until like a few years later that I actually found out there was like 6 more tracks. But yeah, this has since become one of my favorite albums of all time. I often, when people ask like pick one album, it's often this or Demon Days by Gorillaz. They're kind of like up there, in Hospice by the Antlers, like as my favorite albums, like top of the top of the top of the top. This one, because of its good vibes, is just such a good one to listen to endlessly, especially because it's like, I think it's like about exactly an hour, so it's not too short to get so repetitive, you know? Yeah. I don't honestly know if I have much else to say about this. Like I said, because it's less lyrically, thematically complex, I didn't think I'd have much to say about it, but that's fine. There can be shorter episodes. I'm just glad to introduce you to such a good song, or duo of songs as the case may be. So that's it from me today. I hope to talk to you tomorrow.
Break it down.
Whereas "Since I Left You," even though it has the summery vibe, it's "Since I left you." It feels like a breakup song, you know? "Since I left you, I found the world so new." Everything's better now that you're gone, you know? Been there.